The John Gomez Show.
Yes, indeed, my friends. Round number 2 of the John Gomez Show. Yours truly, John Gomez, with you. As you know, every single day we kick it off at high noon to 2. Joining me in the studio is Steve Flanagan, the founder and president of what I would say is the Tea Party on Long Island, the Conservative Society for Action. Steve, welcome aboard. It's good to see you again.
No, thanks once again, John. Appreciate it.
Now, you know, since we're talking about the 1st Congressional District, Tim Bishop seat, we've got New York State Senator Lee Zeldin threw his hat in very early. He's going to step down from his Senate seat, and he's running an aggressive campaign. Now, unfortunately, you've got George Damos, who is speaking about Hollywood money or money from California. Fill us in on that, Steve, because I know you've got the facts.
Well, you know, the one thing that bothers me about George Damos, he's running in a primary as a Republican. But I'm not sure he's a Republican, to be honest with you. I'm sure he has an R next to his name on the election district, verifications and all that. But he certainly isn't acting like one right now. The problem with George, I believe, is that he runs every year. He's like one of those games at the amusement park where the mole head pops up. 2004, 2006, 2007. He gets bonked on the head, bonked on the head, loses, but keeps coming back for more. Well, one thing changed, though, this time. George went out and got married in the last couple of years. And his father-in-law is now Angelo Tascopoulos, who is one of the biggest fundraisers for the Democrats in California. Happens to be personal friends with Nancy Pelosi. This guy is worth about $600 million. And, I just got to think to myself that, George comes in, he meets his future father-in-law, his daughter is there, and he says, oh, yeah, this is the man I want to marry. His name is George Damos. So what does he do? He's an attorney, but he wants to run for Congress.
Well, it's funny. What does he do? Darling, and I kind of had this kind of little tongue-in-cheek scenario. Darling, no, what does he do? Oh, well, he's a former SEC attorney. Oh, really? Former, okay, but what does he do now? Well, he practices. Oh, okay. Can I see his tax return? Do you know this guy has not pulled a salary since, I don't even know, it goes as far back as 2010. His salary, and I'm not making this stuff up, folks. Mm-hmm. You can find it yourself. Even Newsday reported it. His salary, he declared as zero, literally zero. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, if I'm the multimillionaire's father, I'm thinking to myself, honey, what are you doing? Who are you marrying? And now, just to carry it a step farther here, his wife, Tascopoulos' daughter, she, over a 10-year period, she's now, I think, how old is she? I think she's 38 or 28.
Yeah, approximately, yeah.
So over a 10-year period, she donated $260,000 to all Democrats out in California. So over a 10-year period, not to one Republican. And so now, all of a sudden, she marries George. She apparently they move out here. She's registered to vote in Ronkonkoma, Long Island. And this is according to the news. And suddenly, she has an epiphany. Now she's a registered Republican. Now, how does that happen, Steve?
I find that all, as disingenuous as it possibly can be. Listen, George epitomizes the career politician. Like you said, this guy doesn't have a regular job. He needs to be a member of Congress. I think his father-in-law wants him to be a member of Congress. What I fear is that, George has taken his money from the most hardcore liberal Democrats, very few of them from around here, mostly over there in California. And if you look at his election filings, you'll see that there's only a couple of dollars. I think it's within the hundreds, maybe the low thousands of campaign contributors. It's mostly his father-in-law's money.
Yep.
Now, if somebody's dropping that kind of money on you and somebody has this kind of influence and they're having drinks with Nancy Pelosi on a weekly basis, how are you going to stand, and who are you going to be beholding to once you get in Congress? My fear is that we're going to have a replay of a long past congressional race here, right in the first CD, where we elect a Republican. A couple of months later, he turns into a Democrat. I don't know if you recall that, going back to a number of years ago. It happened actually in a race, prior to Bishop. But my concern is this: if you're taking money from the Democrats, You're sitting here, you're splitting and fighting the Republican establishment. You're fighting the conservative party. You're fighting groups like ours. We're the Conservative Society for Action. We want conservative politics and conservative candidates. We look at somebody like Lee Zeldin, who has a proven record as a New York State senator. This guy fought for the tax cap. One of our biggest problems here on Long Island is property taxes.
Also
he ran on a platform of going out and fighting for that and delivered.
And the MTA tax.
MTA,
and he delivered.
Payroll tax, delivered. Okay? It was part of a campaign that we worked on a number of years ago to try and change the balance of power in New York State so conservatives had more power. He delivered. There's a track record there. I have to look at George Demos, see the amount of money that he has from his father-in-law, see what the source is, and all I can conclude is that guy is here to be a spoiler and no other reason.
I mean, look at what he did to Altshuler. I mean, you know, when we were talking about, you remember, Randy, I mean, I used to crisscross with him all the time running in 2010. Right. Very nice guy, very accomplished guy. I think he lost his father when he was very young, if I remember correctly. He built every single thing on his own. No money was given to him. And he built it to a very successful corporation. And Demos, all he did was just attack the heck out of him. Basically, wrote Bishop's campaign for Bishop, and then unfortunately, Randy Altshuler, who you know, no one's perfect. It's like looking for the ideal candidate. But again, I think he did represent some good Republican and conservative ideals. So sure enough, Demos comes in and ruins the guy. And now he's basically doing the same thing, or he's trying to do the same thing. And I remember when he first came out with this attack on Lee Zeldin, calling Lee Zeldin a pro-Obamacare person, I'm thinking to myself, George, you better have something more than that. Please, have something more. I don't mind a nice primary on the issues that's credible. But if that's all you've got, and the fact that you were a former SEC attorney for maybe, I don't know, two or 3 years, and even your history being an SEC attorney is in question because of the whole whistleblower case. You remember that, right, Steve?
Sure do.
So that's even he had to resign essentially in disgrace. So, and now hasn't had a job since. Literally, George Demos has not had a job since he had to leave the SEC in disgrace. And now he wants to be a Republican congressman from Long Island.
Yeah, well, you know what bothers me? You mentioned that whole thing about trying to pin Obamacare on Zeldin. Yeah. Okay, that's a bold-faced and absolute lie. Okay, I'm looking at a document right now. Okay, it's dated April 12th of 2012. Okay, and it's a headline from the governor's office, Andrew Cuomo. Governor Cuomo issues executive order establishing statewide health exchange. Again, April 12th, 2012. Governor Andrew Cuomo today issued an executive order to establish a statewide health exchange, a move that will significantly reduce cost of average coverage for individuals, not true, small businesses, not true, and local governments. The exchange will be entirely financed by the federal government and will be institutional in establishing first-ever competitive marketplace, bring down costs of health care. The implementation of the health care benefit exchange and other reform in New York was all brought about by executive order from Andrew Cuomo. So that's a lie about Zeldin supporting Obamacare. It was done by this governor in this state.
Steve, I was just going through my notes. In fact, I found the article on the George Demos issue. He married a woman, Chrissa, 28 years old, and I'm reading from the newspaper here, has undergone a transformation from a California fundraiser of Democrats donating $260,000 over a decade. Holy mackerel, those are big numbers. And now she's a Republican registered to vote in Ronkonkoma. Now, this is George Demos's wife. So, in George Demos, he's running on character. He's running on integrity. And now come on. It's kind of speaks for itself. So now we have, I'd love to get her on the program. Can't get him on the program. He says he's be on, I'll be on, but he never comes on. And now going to the whistleblower issue of the George Demos campaign. This is back in 2012, reported on the Bloomberg News and written by Bill Cohen. And this is and I had him on the program, Steve. I'll probably have to get him back on again. He was shocked. He said, I can't believe this guy has the, can I say balls?
There you go.
He can't have the balls. I can't believe he has the balls to run for Congress after the disgrace that he had down in the Securities Exchange Commission. And essentially, you know the story, right, Steve?
Oh, absolutely, sure.
You tell it because I have it right here. But
well, it's interesting. There's a website called Crooks and Liars. It's a political blog type of a thing, but they've got a good track record of going into these types of things. And one of the headlines that came out, touching on what you were talking about, and the headline basically says, SEC attorney dimed out J.P. Morgan whistleblower to his employers. Now he's running for Congress. What an outrage type thing. But one thing that was interesting is, and again, this is a complicated case involving SEC attorneys working on a case, or a lot of attorneys. George Demos happened to be one of them. But basically, according to this article, it says there was one case that never made headlines, and that was this. Demos' campaign website and public statements omit a reference to a report last March of an SEC Inspector General's report, which found that Demos had improperly disclosed protected, non-public information about a whistleblower to the counsel for the whistleblower's employer, a major Wall Street bank, which was J.P. Morgan Chase. The Inspector General's charges of misconduct grew out of an SEC probe that began in 2003 of J.P. Morgan and other big financial institutions suspected of illegal market practices. What happened in that case is that they found this out. It's improper. It's unethical. It flies in the face of lawyer client privilege, and George knew this. He must have known it.
See, basically,
if he's as smart as he says he is, he must have known this.
Right, exactly. I love it. It's almost like Clinton-esque. They're Yale, they're Rhodes Scholars, and suddenly I can't recall. There's certain things they just can't recall. Now,
but he wasn't prosecuted for this.
That's what I find out.
He wasn't prosecuted for this, and this is the thing that bothers me.
Yeah.
If you have that level of impropriety and illegality, why weren't you?
I agree.
Why weren't you prosecuted? And I guess obviously it's a public relations thing. The SEC would have been embarrassed,
right?
And basically George had to make a decision.
Yeah.
Okay. Stand on this. Go through the case. Stand for disbarment or whatever else would have been the penalty, or you can quietly step aside, so that we don't make a big issue of this. So this is a man who wants to run for Congress.
On integrity.
Who doesn't even, on an integrity issue, and this guy didn't even have the proper integrity to do what was right as an SEC attorney.
And from my understanding of the case, it's, and folks, if you don't, know what a whistleblower is, now, there was a guy who worked for J.P. Morgan who actually his position at J.P. Morgan was to fetter out illegal behavior and improper behavior. He found improper behavior. He goes to the SEC as a whistleblower, to let the SEC know that J.P. Morgan is doing some funky stuff over there. He goes to George Demos, just happens to be the attorney that he happens to go to, and he says, the whistleblower, his name is Peter Severi. He says, "Listen, I want to divulge this information, and by the way, I want to be considered a whistleblower. Is there money for me if I whistleblow?" And George Demos surprisingly said, "No, there is no money for you." But he said he was so determined to divulge this information, he went through it anyway. So what George Demos did was go around this guy's back, and he went to, according to the story, he went to J.P. Morgan and Chase and say, "Hey, listen, you've got an employee over there, Paul Severi, who's ratting on you." So basically putting Severi in grave jeopardy on doing this. And I just don't do some people just live in complete delusion? Because, you run for office, this happens, you have to step down in disgrace, you step down quietly, and then you run for office. Okay, fine, run for office. But then you run for office and the basis being on integrity, on the fact that you were a former SEC attorney, and then he says he worked at the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, which we come to find out he worked there as a summer intern for 7 weeks. Come on, George. You didn't put hardened criminals away. Come on, man.